In history, I think maybe 100 years from now or 200 years from now, people will look back and say, the American Constitution was a magnificent beta model. Now, with the experience of our era, and the energy and the brain power and the consciousness of people like us, we will now design the second model. And we will build upon that experience and make it even better. Instead of lasting 100 years, maybe it'll last 500 years. And then it will probably fail too, because we won't see everything. But then at the end of the 500 years, there will be a new group of people who say, aha, the model number 2 was better than model number 1, but it had some problems with it. So now we'll build model number 3, and that will last for 5,000 years. And this is how the revolution continues. And that is I'd like to add just one little specific contribution to what I think will be an important addition to the second model. I think perhaps the greatest mistake that was made at the creation of our wonderful republic was because the Founding Fathers, understandably, but accidentally adopted the wrong word to describe the system they were creating. They used the word government. They said, what kind of government are we going to build here? And in the founding documents, you say, it's government does this, government does that. Well, think about it. What is the proper function of government? By definition, it is to govern. Uh-oh. Uh-oh. That's a mistake. The Founding Fathers used the word government because that was the word that was in use at the time. That's what they always had. The world had governments. People were always governed by the state. And so they just adopted the word because that was it. But what they created was not a government at all. They created what I would suggest should have been called a protectorate. They created a state that was designed not to govern the people, but to protect the people, to protect their lives, liberty, and property, nothing more. And that's what they created. And I believe that if they had the foresight to have used the word protectorate in all of their writings, then all the school children for generations thereafter would be talking about this thing called a protectorate. And the very use of the word would trigger off the definition of what is the proper function of the state. And you see what an assist that would be. So I suggest that when we all get together and do this second model, we're going to use a different word. Let's use the word protector. Now I take my Constitution hat off and put my money hat back on. And I know that money is a topic that's very much in the minds of many people. And as you folks know, I'm here in Austin primarily to do a one-day seminar called The Crash Course on Money. And I hope that many of you will be able to attend it. I'll be talking about things in that seminar entirely different from my topic here this evening. The motivation for most people coming to the seminar is that they want to have an idea, a better idea, of what they can do to protect themselves in this economic perfect storm that is approaching. In fact, it's not really approaching anymore. We used to talk about, see those clouds over there on the horizon, those big black clouds? You know, one of these days we're going to have a real problem. Well, now the darn things are right overhead, and it's not really approaching, it's here. We're beginning to feel the winds and the rain and the snow and all of that right now. And people want to know, how can they protect themselves in the short run? How can they protect their assets? Because you know there's going to be a lot of inflation ahead. We'll talk about inflation versus deflation and what sectors will be affected, in my opinion at least, which will be affected by deflation for a while and which will be subject to massive inflation. We'll talk about what you can do about it and what investments there may be that are still viable in this crisis period. Most importantly, we'll be talking about how to repair the system, so it won't be just a question of survival, but how to make a system that will benefit our children and our grandchildren as well. I think any discussion of these issues that doesn't have the long view of history is very, very deficient. And if we don't look at the system, you know, we have all the money in the world, but we lose the freedom to enjoy it. We made a huge mistake. To me, it's like counting your money on the sinking Titanic. It's, you don't get the whole picture. But anyway, tonight, I realize that there are a lot of people who may not have been familiar with my work on the Federal Reserve System. And so what I'm going to do is take a condensation of my original talk that I've given so many times over the years on the Federal Reserve System called The Creature from Jekyll Island, and condense it down into a much smaller, manageable segment, and then follow it with a short overview of what I think the situation looks like today, what's happened since the book was published, and kind of a brief view of where I think we're headed. And then I think we'll probably be out of time. And you may remember that those of you who heard what I call my original recipe talk, generally it was called The Creature from Jekyll Island, just like the book. But in reality, it had a different title, that at least I intended it to be known as under a different title, which was An Appearance of the Fourth Kind. Somebody giggled or hummed on that, so you know where I'm going with this now. And that statement is based on a quotation taken from an obscure philosopher by the name of Epictetus, who lived in I think it was the 3rd century BC in an obscure kingdom called Phrygia. And he was a philosopher, and some of his writings survived and have been translated. And I ran across one of the most amazing quotations I've ever read, attributed to Epictetus. And this is it. Epictetus said, "Appearances are 4 kinds. Things either are as they appear to be, or they neither are nor appear to be, or they are but do not appear to be, or they are not, and yet appear to be." I know everybody's got that. It's amazing how confusing that sounds when in reality it's just a simple concept. And I figured that if Epictetus were alive today, he'd probably be the chairman of the Federal Reserve System, or Harvard professor of money theory or something like that. But what he said was pretty simple, but he made it confusing with his explanation. What he said was appearances are 4 kinds. Things either are or they aren't. There's 2. And then regardless of which they are, they can appear to be the opposite. So there's 4. Why didn't he just say so? Well, because he was practicing for a career in banking. So anyway, the appearance of the 4th kind was, as you remember, is those things which are not, and yet appear to be. And that's the best explanation I could think of at the time for the Federal Reserve System. Because we all expect it to be a government agency. It's not. We expect it to be in the interest of the American people. It's not. All of these things that people think about the Federal Reserve System is a complete reversal of its reality. So that'll be half of my presentation today, but I must tell you that the most important part of this talk, I must not forget, it's the joke section. And I'm going to tell you 2 genie jokes. I like genie jokes. And the first one is the story of this young fellow who was going through the alley, and he came across a bottle which was all dirty, but he rubbed it off and found these fancy decorations on it, pulled the cork out, and you know what happened? The smoke came out of the bottle, and there was the genie that appeared right in front of him, and he said, the genie said, "You have released me from my prison of the ages. Now I will grant you 3 wishes." And the kid said, "Gosh, a real genie, going to give me 3 wishes?" And he said, "Yes, whatever you wish is my command." So the kid said, "Let's see, genie, I've always wanted a basketball. I want a basketball." The genie said, "Vroom." And there was this basketball in the kid's hands. The kid said, "Oh, this is wonderful, genie. I want a bicycle." "Vroom," said the genie. And there was a brand new bicycle. The kid said, "Oh, this is wonderful. You know, genie, I'm thirsty. Make me a malted." "Vroom," he said. "You're a malted." Okay, second one is even worse. A fellow walks into a bar, and he has an ostrich with him. They go up to the bar, and the ostrich right along with them. They both sit on bar stools. And the bartender, of course, is amazed. He's never seen an ostrich in his bar before. So he walked up to the fellow and the ostrich and said, "Well, what can I do for you? Would you like a drink?" And the guy said, yeah, I'd like a drink. He said, I'd like a vodka martini, please. And the bartender started to leave, but the guy turned to the ostrich and he said, would you like something to drink? What would you like? And to the bartender's amazement, the ostrich turned to the guy and spoke and said, oh, whatever you like is fine with me. Whatever you do, I like it, so a vodka martini would be fine. Well, the bartender was really amazed at this. An ostrich and a talking ostrich did that. So he went and got the 2 vodka martinis. A few minutes later, came back when the drinks were getting toward the bottom, and he said, would you like another? And the fellow said, no, one is enough. How much do I owe you? And the bartender pulled out the receipt, and including the tax, it was $14.44. And he said, that's the bill. Well, the guy reached in his pocket and pulled out all of the money he had, laid it out on the bar, counted it out. It was $14.44, right to the penny. Amazing. Then they left. Well, the next day, the guy comes back with the same ostrich into the same bar, and the bartender said, well, would you like your vodka martini today? He said, no, today I'd like a different drink. I think I'll have a whiskey sour. He turned to the ostrich and said, would you like a drink? The ostrich said, oh, yes, I would. I think a whiskey sour would be fine. You know, I like whatever you drink. Whatever you do is fine with me. I always like that. So they had a whiskey sour, the same thing. A little bit later, the bartender came back and said, would you like another? No was the answer. How much do I owe you? The bartender looked at the tab and said, well, this one is $12.22, including tax. And so the fellow reached in his pocket, pulled out everything he had, laid it on the bar, and there it was, $12.22, right to the penny. Amazing again. Well, this went on every day for the whole week. Each day, the fellow and the ostrich came in. Each day, they had a different drink. Each day, it was a different tab. And each day, no matter what it was, the fellow reached in his pocket, and he always had the exact right amount of money. So finally, at the end of the week, the bartender turned to the fellow and he said, you know, I've got to ask you a question. He said, I'm totally amazed by what I see here, a talking ostrich in my bar and all that, but the thing that really amazes me, how is it, no matter what the bill is, you reach in your pocket and you pull out everything you have, you spread it out, and you've got the exact amount of money to the penny. How do you do that? The guy said, well, let me tell you a little story. He said, I was walking through an alley one day, and I came across a bottle, and it was all dirty, and I wiped it off, and I saw these fancy decorations, pulled the cork out, and out came the smoke. And there was a genie, and the genie said, you have released me from my prison of the ages, and now I will grant you 2 wishes. Well, 2 this time is not as good as 3, but anyway, 2 is pretty good. And so the fellow said, I get 2 wishes, no matter what I want. The genie says, yes, your wish is my command. So he said, all right, genie, my first wish is, let's see, I think, yes, I know what it's going to be. I would like to be able to afford, no matter what it is I want in life, I want to be able to have enough money to buy it. Whether it's a drink or a trip around the world or a yacht, no matter what it is, I want to be able to afford it. And he said, the genie went, vroom, I grant you your wish. And he said to the bartender, ever since that day, no matter what I've ordered, no matter how expensive or inexpensive it is, I reach in my pocket, and it's a miracle. I always have the right amount of money. And he said, the other wish I gave to the genie was this. He said, genie, I've always wanted a chick with long eyelashes and long legs who always agreed with everything I wanted to do. Now, I bet you've never believed it, but those jokes have a connection with what I want to talk about. And the moral to those stories is that you ought to be very, very careful what you wish for, because if you get it, it may not be what you thought it was going to be. And that's my theme tonight. And I'm going to take this presentation as if it is a condensation of the old original recipe talk on the Federal Reserve, plus a little update at the end. And I've decided to condense a summary of it down into 2 sound bites. You know, when you're traveling around and every once in a while you get a chance to go on the radio, and even more rarely somebody from a television station will say, well, we hear you're going to be in town tonight. Would you like to be on the local news? And you say, yeah, of course. And they say, well, we'll give you about 10 seconds to summarize your 9-minute speech.